minutes here to hop on, and got your coffee ready. Interview her and talk about this whole sexual abuse stuff that continues to be a huge issue. That'll be the main topic today with Elizabeth. There's just been a huge rise in people coming out of these cultures that have been through some very horrific things. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that. Her testimony is and what she's been through. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. You can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you nice and clear. Looks good. Got a clear video. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for joining me this morning. So yes, now you grew up in, Elizabeth, you grew up in an Amish community, is that correct? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There we go. Turn up my volume.
Yeah, it is.
All right, I got my volume turned up there. I think I had my volume down too much there. So, Elizabeth, what community did you grow up in the Amish? What community was this and what state?
I grew up in Bern, Indiana, Geneva, which is about an hour south of Fort Wayne.
Okay. Yeah.
And
let's see here. There we go. Geneva area.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And if anybody knows if you know where Amishville is, then it's, I grew up about a mile east of there on 900 South.
Okay. Now, how many was in your Amish family?
We were a family of 12, and I was the oldest. We were 6 boys and 6 girls, and then we had a sister that was stillborn, so we would have been 13 with her.
Okay. Now,
and we grew up in one of the most conservative churches in Adams County, where we didn't have motors, we didn't have, all of that. Just very conservative.
Yeah.
So I have totally a different life than what I did when I grew up.
Gotcha. How long have you been out?
Just a little over a month, if even that long. Just not very long. From the Amish community, I have been out of the Bern Amish community for over 5 years.
Okay, but
almost 5.5, because it was January 2017 when I moved up to LaGrange County, Indiana.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy your freedom to be away from all of that. Not only the area with craziness, but also away from the Amish completely. Now, what made you want to completely get away from the Amish kind of lifestyle? Was it just what you were going through, or what would you say made you want to just get completely away from it and put it all behind you?
It was not just the Amish life.
Okay.
It was not just the Amish lifestyle. I love that lifestyle. But it was the abuse that I had endured at the hands of my husband. And the state had stepped in back in 2017 when I left. And they left when I left. And through everything, the Amish were still set on reconciliation. So I was like, I'm not going to stay if this is all they want is reconciliation, because my husband was charged with rape, and he's a violent sex offender, and plus all the other abuse added on top. I was not going to put my boys through that again. And yes, by the way, I do have 7 sons, ages 5, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And we also had one baby that died from SIDS in 2013, and that was also a little boy. He was God's angel sent to me to help me through some very tough times, even though he took him home again to be with him.
Wow.
But through it all, I am so glad and thankful that he's safe in the arms of Jesus.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Wow, that's a pretty large family you have now. When you left, you have your children yourself, or did they stay Amish?
Nope, I have my children with me, and when I left Bern, I was 8.5 months pregnant and had 6 other boys. My oldest was 8 at that time.
Okay.
So I had very small children when I left Bern with only $50 in my pocket and not knowing how I'm going to make it. So, yeah, God has done a lot for me.
Yeah.
He still does.
He's
been faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. You know, God was right in the midst. And when you're going through things, when God's people are being beaten up by the enemy, sometimes God intervenes, and he if we have faith in Him and trust Him, He gets us right out through that storm, don't He?
Yes, He does.
Now,
He does, absolutely. He does that.
Right.
And probably the hardest part for me was for my mom and dad, and knowing that they're going to shun me for sure. Because, see, when I left Bern in 2017, the church in Bern shunned me for leaving them there, and because my husband ended up in prison. So through that, I was shunned until about a year ago. The church up here in LaGrange County went and lifted the shunning without Bern. But with that lifting of the shunning came also another form of, you're a member now you're going to do as we say, or not make any decisions without us, without our approval. And that meant trying to accommodate and work with them on taking Willis back into the home at some point. And my oldest son told me, he's 14, and he said, Mom, if you ever let Dad back in the home, the day you let him back in is the day I'll move out.
Wow.
So I told them I will never do that to them. So through that, I filed for a legal separation, and it's just been a very stressful thing, because Willis is throwing a lot of things in the path to make it very hard to get this done. We had a hearing scheduled, and he goes and asks for change of venue, which venue of judge, which now our case is possibly being taken out of Adams County and possibly to Wells County. But right as of now, it's still just sitting there, and we don't know what's going to happen next. So he has 2 attorneys partnered up for him, lady attorneys, get that, Fort Wayne, which they're only doing their job. All they care about is their money. Yep. They don't care what happens to anybody else. But I've been very fortunate in having a lawyer, an attorney that their office is very caring, and they have moral standards and are Christians.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful for that. But back to the sexual abuse that I endured, yes, it was really hard to come out and talk about it already, because that was my husband. He was supposed to be my best friend. He's supposed to be the person that I could trust the most on this earth. But when I got married, I had no idea I was going to have a life like that. I just I had high hopes of having an awesome marriage and lots of children. I always loved children. So that was my dream. But yes, that's not what God had in mind for me, I guess, because through all the abuse that I endured, He has brought me out to be a better person.
Yeah.
And through the years, the boys witnessed, my sons witnessed a lot of abuse, a lot of violence. And then after I left, I found out that he had abused the boys physically as well as verbally in many ways that I did not even know about. And then they witnessed him beating up horses with a ball bat, taking the ball bat over the horse's head.
Mm.
Just because the horse might be balking or not doing what he wanted it to do. So my boys would still talk about that, and as so far they have no desire to have a relationship with their father. Will they in the future? I do not know. That is totally their choice. But my second son, this one here, just blows my mind, and I've been so mad at myself that I was not there. Is almost a year ago, I found out that my second son, when he was between 6 and 7 years old, then we had these banty chickens out in the barn. So he took a chicken and wanted to see if it could swim and put it in the water tank, the horse's trough, to see if it could swim. And then he took it out. Well, his dad seen it and said, because you put that chicken in there and made that water dirty, I'm going to give you the same treatment. And he dunked him underwater and held him there, head and all, everything. And when my son, when he told me that, I was furious. And I just held him and we both cried and cried. And I told him, I'm so sorry that I wasn't there. I had no idea your dad was doing these types of things. But they all said, we were scared, Mom, because we knew you would not be quiet. And either dad would be worse when you weren't around, or then he would take it out on you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they never spoke up. And yet they were also very young and had a lot of other things on their plate and thinking they have to protect mom from their father and knowing the things that he would do. So that's the life that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it brings back a lot of memories as I hear you say that, because there was 5 of us boys before any sisters, and we very much feared dad, and over little stupid things that we might have done, like you mentioned the chicken. I remember just throwing a shovel in that broke into the where I shoveled a grain, and it broke, and I got beaten half to death just for that because it broke. But what you're saying there, I think a lot of the abuse gets overlooked in the Amish church. I remember dad getting very little discipline. Now, in your church, with all of this going on, was the church aware, and did they take your word or your son's word that dad was abused if dad was doing these things? Because I remember my mom, she'd say some certain things to the church, and they just kind of overlooked it, like mom was making it up or something.
At the very beginning, the first time the church ever found out about something was back in 2013, right after our baby died. Then Willis slammed me into the wall, and there was a huge dent in the wall where my head had hit. But from that came the fact that we were having an argument about my sister and his brother. His brother had molested my sister when she was between 7 and 8 years old, and he was 18, 19. He's a big guy, and he had molested her, and we had not known about this. This was like 7, 8 years later, and she had confided in me about it, and then our baby died, and I totally forgot about it until one day I was at mom's, and then some things came up. My mom was asking my sister Leah, how, why do you get so? She got really uptight, angry. She would sit in the closet and cry. And I'm not saying this to shame my sister, because this was not her fault at all. But she would, and my mom thought she was not a good mother. That's all she came to. But she asked my sister that day, why do you do this? None of my other daughters ever acted like this. And right at that moment, that flashed into my mind. And I always say, God put it there because He knew it was time. So I told my mom, tell her to tell you what she told me, and she refused to talk. So I related to her that we were, Willis and I had lived at his parents for 2 years after we were married. And it was within that first year, in 2007 sometime, that Willis and I were over at his parents for supper, and my parents came, so they joined us. And sometime throughout that evening, his brother came up behind my sister and grabbed her, put her face down on the bed, and she couldn't see anything. And she said she doesn't really know what he did because she couldn't see anything. She only felt it. So even though he did that to her, she did neither did she see anything on top of the fear of everything else. So anyway, back to where Willis and I we were having an argument about that because he said my family is lying. You're saying my brother raped your sister. And I said, well, what else did he do other than rape? What is that? And he said, well, rape is only for grown women. It's not for little girls. And so I told him, let's get the dictionary and look it up. So we did. And then he got really, it escalated from that point on. And my two oldest were 4 and 5 at the time, and they watched everything, they witnessed it. Through that, the ministers were involved, and they shunned Willis or excommunicated him for 6 weeks. And they didn't me at the time. At that point, they were supportive of me saying, this is not okay. But you've got to remember this. My bishop down there was Rufus Swartz, and his wife is a sister to Willis's dad. So we've got family members here within the minister, within the ministry.
Which makes it much worse.
Yes. So about a year later, with less than a half year, things started flipping over. Where the ministers started on me about things. It was, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then by 2013, this was in 2013, 2014, 2015, it was so bad. I had Daniel was born in April 2015, and I was that summer severely depressed. And I still talk about it to my boys if they remember how mom was and where I only got done what I could do, and that was the bare necessities, laundry, cooking, cleaning, and even that was a struggle. Other than that, I was pretty much in bed. And they said, yes, they remember that. Well, Willis thought I was just putting a huge front on, and everything was in my head, and I was struggling. So by December 2015, I was out at Rest Haven, though I had to beg and beg to go. So the ministers finally agreed to let me go, and there was an Amish couple from LaGrange County, Indiana, Dave and Lena Chuck, that came down to Bern one night and brought me up here. I took my boys to my parents, and I came up to Rest Haven, here in Goshen, Indiana. And now I have to stop and think a little. It's been a long time ago. I went there and I was there for 7 weeks. Never once went home. My parents would bring the boys up pretty much once a week if they could, or twice a week. I requested that Willis would never come up because I wanted time to myself, time to heal, and see if we can't make this marriage work. So I would start. I after 2.5 weeks there, I started talking to him again, and then I soon learned I need to have someone sit in on phone calls because the phone calls were not good at all. But then at 7 weeks, I went home and we swapped. The day I walked out, he was in at Rest Haven. But at Rest Haven, he was there for 7 weeks. And did he learn anything? I always say, yes, he did. He learned to be a polite abuser, if you know what that is. He just went more underground. He learned how to hide it in front of other people. And I went home and I did not want to go home, but I knew what else was I supposed to do. My boys needed me, and Willis came back in, and the first thing his concern was after we were home a couple weeks is, are you pregnant yet?
What?
Are you pregnant yet? And that's because when I was pregnant, I didn't feel good. I couldn't handle stress, and he could literally take advantage of me and try to make people believe that I'm insane, mentally ill, that I need to be monitored on medication and all of that, that I'm not a fit mother. And he's still doing that.
Mm.
And thank God that the authorities, local authorities, and everyone within law enforcement they know better. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
But I went home and I knew I had options. So by the fall of 2016, I was pregnant again, and wasn't feeling good. Things weren't going better. And when people asked him, he would tell them, yeah, they're going great. But no one, the ministers wouldn't come ask me. They just asked Willis and take his word on it, because I was the wife that didn't submit. I was the wife that didn't just do whatever he said. And another thing that they threw over my head was, well, we're at Rest Haven. They had psychological testing done on Willis first and then on me, to do an evaluation. Well, Willis was diagnosed with narcissism and antisocial personality disorders. If you know what that is, then it's not a good combination.
Right.
It's a dangerous person. And for me, I had severe major depressive disorder, a lot of anxiety, and PTSD. So take that combination, and in going back home with a person like Willis.
Which would make the PTSD 10 times worse.
Exactly. And people do not get that. They did not understand that. The ministers didn't. They were so much that it's all in your head. You need to forgive, forgive, forgive. Well, yes, forgiveness is not about Willis. It's about myself and setting me free.
Yeah.
But I could go on and on about that one. But I tried to separate, forgiveness and trust. Nope, they throw that in the same box, and that's where it belongs. So I knew I couldn't go to the ministers for help. So I started getting my things together. I called the women's shelter in Adams County, and see what I would have to do to get um, in there, and what it would take. And excuse me, I'm going to back up here a little. In September of 2016, I one night Willis came home, and he kept going off on me about, I don't even know what. some of the things were things that I thought weren't even worth discussing, but he loved to argue and pick a fight just to get something going. So I was scared. And I ran across the road to the neighbors. The boys were all sleeping. And I called a friend. And I said, I can't do this anymore. What do I do? And she said, well, somebody needs to come and talk to you and him both to get things calmed down. And I said, well, I'm not going to the ministers because they never help. It's always worse when they leave. And so she called the police for me. Well, the police came out, they talked to us and all of that. But what really made me mad is Willis followed me over to the neighbors. But before he came there, he woke up the boys and told them mom left. And we need to pray for her because she's crazy. There's something wrong with her and she needs prayers. She needs help from God. So and on top of that, he leaves them and follows me, and I get back home to crying boys, being told that their mom is crazy and she had left them. So anyway, the police come out, they talk with us, and then the next night, the bishop and one of the ministers show up. And they tell me they're going to send us somewhere for counseling. And I asked where. They said, well, they're not sure yet. Which I later find out it was out in Pennsylvania at Whispering Hope. But I told them I'm not going. And Reuben Swartz, my bishop back then, sat there and he said, Elizabeth, if we get a vote from the church that everyone has agreed, you are going. And I looked at him and I said, Reuben, you just don't get it, do you? I said, I'm not going. I'm not leaving my boys. Willis can go, but I'm not going. And he said, well, Elizabeth, you know what? Don't you know that I have the power and authority to punish you if you don't listen? And I said, well, I don't care. You just got to do what you have to do because I am still not going. But what they didn't know is my boys heard them say that.
Oh.
And the other thing is, I had said, well, I can't do that to my children. And their response was, you know what? We can take care of your children. We'll take your kids. And I told him, you're not getting my children. Well, my boys heard that. So through the years, they've had nightmares where they woke up and were crying for mom and saying, I want my mom. Stop taking my mom away from me.
Wow.
So these people wonder why my boys don't want to see them. It's time they start registering in their minds what they're doing. They were re-victimizing, they're abusing. It's all the same things Willis was doing to us, they were doing, just in a different way. Right. And that's exactly what the Amish church does with the victims.
Yep.
And then I come up here, and the church where I was at now, here in LaGrange County, do they have more of an open mind and understanding of abuse? Yes, they do. But when it comes down to the bottom line, they all have the same thing. It's all the same. Yep. It does not. They're all the same.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out because I don't care if it's new order, old orders, or I don't care what they are. They all have something in common and they want to hide this garbage in the church. And by the way, I just want to say real quick before you continue, thank you for standing up and being bold and want to protect your kids because I'll be honest with you, 99.999% of Amish women will cave to that pressure.
You know, people have asked me, how did you do this? And I always say, it wasn't me, it was God. That's the only way And I would encourage any mother, protect your children.
Yes.
Even if you have to take punishment from the church, take it. I would much rather take punishment than have my kids suffer.
Wow.
Because it has been a pleasure to watch my boys bloom and blossom into the young men they are becoming.
Wow.
It has. And has it been easy? No.
Yeah.
But you know what? We weren't promised a life of easiness, of ease on earth.
Right. Yeah.
But it's worth it.
You definitely suffered for your children. Now, one thing that, after all the interviews I've done now so far, Elizabeth, one thing that always stands out is the church is just so incredibly huge on forgetting and forgiving and moving on. And if the victim brings it back up, now you're the one that's bad. You're the one that needs counseling. And there they go. They ship you off to some Amish nonsense counseling place. And it's not even you that needs the counseling.
I know. You know, did I need people to talk to? Yes, I did. It was because of all the abuse, and I have done a lot of healing. I have a strong support system around me, and even the local authorities from Adams County, they were awesome, and they still are awesome. And that was a godsend too with those people.
Yeah.
But back to the church, with people think that, I don't know how to word this, but people think that the Amish are getting this. They're getting what abuse is about. And they're getting the fact that they know how to deal with it now and what to do about it. Just like they have these abuse awareness meetings. That's just a cover up.
Yep.
It's like putting a Band-Aid over a huge wound,
yep.
And it keeps festering.
Absolutely.
And festering.
I agree with you.
It just goes underground more and more and more.
Yep.
And the longer it goes on, the deeper the wound gets.
Yep, I absolutely agree. I shared I think it was in Iowa, was it 2 weeks ago maybe?
I seen that.
See that? Yeah, you know what they're doing, and I've seen a lot of people that defend their garbage, what they're doing. But I'm going to be honest with you. What you said, you hit the nail right on the head, because they are wanting to make it look like they're going to do something about it. But if and I know a few people that were there. I've talked to a few people that were sitting in there that were in Amish clothes, and I'm going to tell you, they have very, very much still siding with the perpetrator and very little for the victim.
Have you read the book that they put together, Abuse? Oh, it's a little blue book. I don't have it right now here with me. But if I would read some of the questions off. But they put it together. It was the abuse awareness team whole thing. But the one question in there was about a guy wondering what he should do about his friend or brother-in-law being a perpetrator, and, about getting him help or whatever. And the answer was that get a lawyer, an attorney, or then get someone from the abuse awareness team, go into the prosecutor and sit down with him and ask him, what can we do to, what can we compromise here, in other words? Mm-hmm. That this perpetrator can just go to one of these Amish supposedly counseling places. And that made me mad, because I said, there's still, why not take the sentence that he deserves?
Right.
And then still go for counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're still trying to slip out of it.
Yep.
And just go their own way.
Yep. Yeah,
they want everything their way. They want their own rules, their own government, but yet everybody else, if you're under them, you're supposed to abide by their rules
Yeah.
But they don't want to abide by anybody else's rules.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it just makes my blood boil with so many of these stories. You know, there's been enough of us that left out of these cultures now where there's been a lot of awareness being made.
I know.
And they even hate that. They've even reached out to me and they tried to get me to stop interviewing people. It's like, well, wait a minute, you have no resources except for some non-licensed garbage that you're sending victims to try to reprogram them on medication to get them to submit.
But you know what? Actually, since I left, I have been told by my dad that I was watching you too much, listening to Eli Yoder. And I told him, really? You want the honest answer? I rarely have listened to Eli Yoder. Said, but when I did listen to him, it was through one of my dad's drivers, Manuel Ringo. He would listen to you, and then he would say, "Hey, Elizabeth, listen to this one. Here's another truth." And he never was Amish.
Right. I know that there's a lot of drivers that's been showing a lot of my interview people, and to be honest with you, it's encouraged some of them to want to reach out and get help and be rescued.
Yep. So I told him, no, I said, don't blame anyone. This was through my decision in leaving, and I said, I don't want anyone blamed, though. There are people being blamed, and I don't think they should be. They should be blamed, but that's just what they do. It's always somebody else's fault. And it's like my oldest son told someone recently, he said, why do they always play the blame game? And he's 14 years old.
He gets it.
Yep, they do. My boys get it.
That's good. I'm glad you understand and see what's going on. By the way, thank you for not putting up with going over to Whispering Hope in Pennsylvania. You know how much bad stories that come out of that place? It's pathetic.
I know. It's time that some of these places are shut down.
Yes.
Another place is Harmony Home Haven up in Michigan. I don't know if you've heard of that one or not.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where Willis went for counseling just recently. And he's going to go, he goes through their program, or he's planning on it. And he went up there in person. Now he's doing everything over the phone. But before he could go, he had to have the court's approval. And I was mad, and still am, that they let him go there, because what Melvin Swartz did is told them that they will get a licensed therapist in just for Willis.
Oh, get out of here. Well, a bunch of lies.
And I told them, no, they won't.
You know how many times I've heard the Amish say exactly what they had to say in court to get their way, and then they do the exact opposite in those comics. They're little bubble, and they do their own little thing, and the judge has no idea that they're literally live teeth in court.
I know. Then another thing he's working on is trying to get the no contact off of my boys. He doesn't want it off of me, but he wants it off the boys. And I don't know, will he ever get it done? He's a sex offender. So he can't live anywhere where there's anyone under 18. So that would mean he can't be around my boys without supervision. So the most he'll probably ever get is supervised visitation. But even with that, I'll fight against it. Unless he can show that he's had a change of heart. And will that happen? Not with the support that he's getting. Because they literally in Bern made a rule, an ordinal, in the church where he's living at, where girls and women can't.
What a sicko.
So through that, now they're not supposed to do that.
You're getting a little trouble there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little bit fuzzy, but I can hear you though. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So you're saying that those socks was what was triggering him, or what?
He said seeing bare feet and bare legs triggers him, and it turns him on. So now women and girls aren't supposed to come to church barefooted.
Oh my goodness! You know what that reminds me of is that one that got busted. He was a preacher in his 60s in New York, and after this pedophile was busted by the church, not the outside yet at this point, they would make his grandchildren stay in. So okay, now just picture this for a moment. This Amish guy is out there doing his thing, making his furniture, whatever. He's got freedom, right? But the victims are being told, you got to stay inside.
Exactly.
I mean, what is wrong with this picture? That drives me crazy.
I know. And that's exactly what they're doing with him. They all know he has a problem. But they are not doing anything about it. They're everybody else is being punished for him because they went to his house and asked him, how can we make it easier for you, or what can we do for you to make it easier for you? I'm not exactly sure their wording, but that was what he came up with, so that's what they did. And then when I told my bishop up here while I was still Amish about that, then he said, well, did you hear him say that? And I said, no, personally I did not, but I believe it because I know how he is.
Right.
But my bishop up here told me when I told him that I'm not coming back, he said that you know that you are what you should be doing because I've gotten a job also. He said, you know that you shouldn't be working and have your boys at home by themselves. My 3 youngest, I have them enrolled at the child care place where I live, work. And then my 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-old are at home during the day by themselves. And he said, you should not have those boys at home by themselves because he said if something would happen, DCS would get involved. And I told him, no, they won't. They're old enough to be on their own.
Right.
They have phones that they can get a hold of me. We have ways to communicate, and they know what to do when there's an emergency. I have covered those bases. And then he said, well, Dave Chuck even said that you would, if you keep on doing what you are, DCS is going to be involved yet. Then before he left, he said, just don't come back saying that, eventually saying that you weren't told or warned what could happen. And later, he left a message and saying that he just wishes I would come back to the Amish and blah, 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 all that. And then he said, you're going to end up homeless and without any boys because of what you're doing. And then his wife told me that a couple of days later that your boys and what you're doing, your boys are on the road to destruction. And I looked at her and I said, no, they are not.
Yeah.
They are not on the road to destruction.
Yeah. When you are on your way out, there's several of them that I'm way out, haven't left yet. And that's what they're hearing is, hey, if you leave, there's just gonna be this and this. It's that they're losing power over you, so that they're scrambling to try to use something to try to get you scared, to get you to stay there and submit to the Amish church.
Yep.
But yeah, it's now your sister. You earlier in the video you mentioned about your sister was sexually abused. Was she ever able to get any justice or anything?
No. You know what happened with that is when I was in 2015 when I was at Rest Haven, then that came up. So the counselor there that I had he had to report that because my sister was still under 16. So he reported it. And a social worker, or I don't know, child service worker, who it was, came out, talked to my sister, got a report, and then the Amish found out about it. So the church where my dad went that time, they told my parents, if Willis's brother, and get this, Willis's brother that molested my sister had married my parents' deacon, the deacon in that church, his daughter, and moved right into that church. So my sister was going to church and he was there. And then on top of it, she was still going to school and he wanted to teach school. And at that point, when he wanted to teach school, we did not know about this. Mm-hmm. But she told my parents, if he teaches school, I am not going. And my dad mom didn't know why. Mm-hmm. But through that, the church came to my parents and ministers, and they said, if Eli Hilty, Willis's brother, goes behind bars or gets any sentencing out of this, charged with anything, then you will be shunned.
Wow.
So my parents went into child services, signed a paper to have the case dismissed.
Oh, wow.
And I had told them I wouldn't do that. Now they wish they never would have. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling my sister I wish she would still do something about it. But I'm not sure if she could because of it now being so long ago. Mm-hmm. So, and she says she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to pull it all up again. And in that way, I don't blame her. Right. But yet I just think, I know she wasn't his only victim, and now he has children of his own and daughters. And don't tell me he stopped.
Yeah, that's what bothers me more than anything, Elizabeth, is those that did this and got by with it, and somehow the Amish church looks at him as, well, you got to forget and forgive. He repented. Well, once they have their own kids, we're finding out a lot of them. I've had a lot of testimonies on now. Later on, they were still doing it. I got an uncle that did the same thing. I mean, he was busted at 17, 18, 19 years old doing very gruesome sexual abuse. And the whole Amish church forgave him, moved on. He ended up with a family of his own. And, well, guess what? Long story short, he was doing it to his own daughters.
Yep. He was. They do that. Mm-hmm. But here's the other thing. Excuse me. Do you know, I want people to know the Amish helped me out a lot. They did. And they have their good points. But that's what they want to use to cover up all the bad. And saying, you know what? They just keep saying, you know what? Well, don't we do this and this and this? Right? You know what? Why do you always have to say the bad things about the Amish? Why are we always bad? Well, that's not the point. It's get your crap straight.
Yep. Thank you for saying that, because I get a lot of
Don't cover it up.
Yeah. I get a lot of backlash from even the former Amish. And by the way, in your neck of the woods that you grew up in, there's Wickies, there's Schwartzes, there's all those in that area over there. They've been very critical of me, but they will literally defend these pedophiles that have been Amish church, and it disturbs me, and it just boils my blood.
You know, don't get me started on Bern, because that's one of the worst communities. And they are so stuck in their ways. They're stubborn. They're like, we're the only ones that are right. And it gets my anger up to a level that sometimes I have to tell myself to cool down.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Every time I interview and hear these gruesome stories over and over and over, I mean, I got a righteous anger. I mean, I do. I mean, I know I hate evil.
Yeah.
I'm a born-again Christian. I literally hate evil. And when I see that evil is able to continue to happen in these Amish communities, we got to make awareness. We got to talk about it, because guess what? If we don't, they're always going to get by with it.
Yep. And okay, Adams County has all these people there that have moved out, moved away. Some leave the Amish, but if you leave the Amish while you're still in Bern, I've had uncles that left years and years ago, and to this day, they are still poison to the Amish.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I didn't leave the Amish when I left Bern, and they do the same thing to me. And there is something dark in that community that just it needs to be exposed. And it's not just this generation, it reaches back to our great grandparents years and years, generations ago.
Yeah. I seen Jacob Swartz comment. He's a good born again Christian, got out of that mess over there. He says, I live there too, and I know how it is. There's a few that know how it is, but it's staggering how many still support this garbage over there. There's a lot of darkness in Bern, Indiana. I've often talked to people that left and got out of there. Some of them don't want to be interviewed, but as soon as you mentioned the area where it was at, where it started, I knew exactly what route you was going, because it's been going on in Bern, Indiana for way too long.
You know, I had, when I go back to Bern, my boys and I always come home with stomach aches. And I tell them it's the spiritual part that makes us sick.
Yep.
It is. It's a darkness there that it just, you got to fight against it.
Yeah.
And I know that I have prayed and prayed when we go, you know, to just not get that again, that feeling again. And it's not as bad as it used to be, but you get down there and get into that and you just want to disappear and get away from there.
Yeah.
And not be a part of it.
Right. You got to eliminate it. You got to get out of there. Now, I'll share with you, since you said that, I even went through my community when I kept hearing just a lot of darkness, a lot of evil. I just simply just stayed on the road, the county roads, and was praying. And one morning, it was early in the morning, I was just praying and pressing in against the demonic forces and cutting them off in Jesus' name, using the power and authority given to us by Jesus Christ. And all at once, Elizabeth, I got so sick to my stomach, I had to literally pull over, and I got physically sick. I threw up because the demonic entities, the demonic force, the darkness in the heavenly realms was so pressurized, so heavy, that I actually, to be honest with you, I wanted to keep praying, but I turned around and left the community. It's just darkness.
It's literally almost every time that I went to Bern, I would come home sick. So I wouldn't go unless, and I hated doing it to my family because my parents were like, why don't you want to come? And it's not because of them. But being away from it and then going back into it is a whole different story than if you're there all the time. You don't see it like you do when you're out.
Right.
It becomes so much more clear that you've been set free.
Yeah. Now, also, I heard of a story recently out of Wisconsin where the ones that reached out, kind of like you did, you know, getting law enforcement involved, the ones that reported it are still in the ban, like 15, 16 weeks in the ban, but yet the pedophile got 4 weeks and is taken back into the church. Have you seen any of that in Bern, Indiana?
Oh, yeah. A lot. One guy, he would come to church and do confessions over and over, just confessions. And then when something was said about it, then one person said, well, it wasn't his fault. His daughter came into the bathroom and started touching his private parts, and he told her not to. And I said, don't feed me that crap. I don't care how old that daughter was. She would never have done that unless he wanted her to.
Yep.
What daughter goes up to her dad or goes into the bedroom or bathroom or wherever he is taking his bath or whatever and start playing with him like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lie from the pit of hell.
It's sick, it's bad, and it's sin. Yep. It's wrong.
Well, they don't like being held accountable for it, and that's why they do what they do. They will shun anybody who calls the cops. They shun. I remember after I left the Amish, the physical abuse got so bad that I got a phone call from my twin brother, and I guess the rest of my brothers actually teamed up and beat the crap out of my father. But, you know, that needed to happen. You know, they broke broom handles on him and showed him who's boss, because finally there was some of us old enough to stand up for ourselves. And I remember hearing back from them, even though I wasn't there no more. They said after that, when they stood up to themselves, Dad finally stopped beating on them because he realized, whoa, my sons are big enough, they're going to wail on me. And it finally changed them. But still, they just don't want nobody to report. They want to take care of it in the Amish.
No. That was their biggest concern when our case was going in Bern, was that nobody outside the Amish community finds out, because then the police would get involved and they were like, you know what would happen? And you can't reach behind any confessions Willis did, because that's bringing up sins that are forgiven.
Yeah. Now,
and I told them, no, it's not, because he didn't repent. He's still doing it.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't matter if you do a confession. What matters is if you repent, needs to stop. Yep.
What Rose Swartz just said was the most common in my Kenton, Ohio Amish community where I grew up at. She just said, Eli, there are quite a few in Bern that even keep confessing to having sex with animals, and it's okay. Do you know how many Amish men that confessed in our church where I grew up at in Kenton? They confessed to having animal sex, and they literally got maybe 2 weeks in the band, and boom, they're right back right with the church, and they keep right on having animal sex over and over and over.
Well, you know, this is pretty gruesome, this one. But I'm going to say it on here because I know a lot of people are watching. There are young boys and young men that they would come and do a confession, and the bishop would say in front of the church, it's not, they had sex with animals, but it's not as far as excommunication as the ban. So some of the older men in that church started asking, what are they doing? So it came out that they have their hand in the, and at the same time that they have their hand inside the animal, they are jacking themselves off. Talk about sick.
Wow.
Do that with pornography.
What a sex-deprived, lustful life to be in such a state of mind, to do gruesome. I mean, just I don't even like talking about it. It's disgusting. It's sick. It makes me half sick to my stomach. Just
it is sick, but at the same time, it needs to be spoken so it's out there that people know this is what they're doing. This is what's happening, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. It's got to stop, and that's why we make awareness and talk about it and expose the crap that's been hidden for a long time.
Yep.
All righty, Elizabeth. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you hopping on here with me and sharing this. I got 3 interviews I'm doing this weekend, and I appreciate you being the first one. There's just been a lot of them that escaped out of these cultures, and my goal is to continue. My big motto is giving all victims a voice, because the reason I use it is because they were always silenced in the Amish church.
Yes, they were. Even though I wasn't very silent.
Well, it's kind of rare, Elizabeth, to be bold like you did, because the women are kind of silenced. The women are looked at as, well, you got to submit to the man. They don't give the women a voice. My mom didn't have a voice. She was silenced over and over and over. So I really applaud you and respect you for that, to stand up and defend yourself.
Yep. I always say, if it would have been just me, I probably would have just taken it or just stayed. But I had children, and they were being affected by it, and I had to be able to be the best mom they could ever have.
Yeah.
And that was to take care of myself, and that was to get away from it.
Yeah. Now,
so was my boys that I left for.
I tell you,
was for them.
I just so respect you for looking out for your boys. I mean, you were not selfish at all. You were literally being abused. You went through a living hell to try to protect your boys. That really stands out to me. Thank you for doing it that way and really looking out for their best interest.
It's like my attorney tells me, when people mess with your kids or try to hurt your children, then Mama Bear comes out. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Bears take care of them.
Yep, yes.
Now, do you...
Okay, it was...
Real quick, before I pick up, do you know a Joe Wiki? I've gotten a lot of missed calls and a couple of voicemails. Do you know a Joe Wiki?
From where?
I don't know.
Burn?
Probably Burn area. I keep getting calls from him. I don't know if he's angry that we're talking about it or not.
There are a couple different Joe Wikis. So, but there's one that I know of that's not Amish, and he would be with the charity church.
Okay.
In Burn. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Burn in...
I know that area.
The charity church.
We'll wrap it up, and I'll get back with him and see if I'm either getting a chewing or what.
But it could be another Joe Wiki too. I don't know. That's the only one I know that's not Amish.
Right.
So.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. You have yourself a blessed weekend. Bye.
Bye.